This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. He's not doing that anymore, is he?
Please, donate.
Exclusive. Adam Bandt sends an email fundraising off the death of his dog, and it has to be seen to be believed. Once again, Daily Mail Online have an exclusive, meaning they sent out a public email.
I mean, they're correct in this article, though, because I had to see it to believe it. I thought this was fake. I thought this was satire. I saw like the comment piece talking about Bandt fundraising off a dead dog, and I was like, what is this about? What does this joke mean? Is he making a joke about Max Chandler Mather being a dog? I was very confused.
Little puppy.
Yeah.
Green's leader Adam Bandt, this is from a couple of weeks ago, but we haven't covered it on the show, so I thought it was worth a crack. Green's leader Adam Bandt sent a heartfelt email to supporters mourning the loss of his dog, only to then repeatedly attach links urging them to donate to his party. Daily Mail Australia has obtained a fundraising email. Incredible work. Mr. Bandt said to party supporters on Thursday, announcing the death of his family dog Max last weekend after 14 years of friendship, love and fun. Aww. But after memorialising the death of his running buddy and chief hair shedder, the tone of Mr. Bandt's email suddenly changed. Mr. Bandt said Max's death got him thinking about the world my children know, a world with pandemics and climate change, with kids living in tents and babies in rubble, and without Max. The email then linked 4 times to a donation page where Green supporters could choose to donate between $25 and $250, plus an option of making monthly contributions.
Yeah.
Guys, the end of financial year is a tough time for all of us, okay? EFS is difficult.
This is where I'm like, look, Greens people listen to the podcast, and maybe the person who wrote this email is listening right now, and I forgive you, but like, what was going? What?
I'm a little less appalled by it all. I think it's pretty
insane.
You've got to. It's all backwards though. People think, oh, his dog died. Then he said, hey,
and then he's fundraising.
He had to write a fundraising email.
Yes,
he had to write a fundraising email.
Financial year.
And like, what the fuck do I say to these people other than the planet's on fire?
But that's the thing. But it's like there is quite a lot. There are a lot of reasons to donate to the Greens. That's the thing, that it's like, why are you acting as though you need to like really reach for something into the depths of your personal life, as though we're not currently ruled by a government that like endorses the genocide of Palestinian people and like gives public money to coal and gas and, you know, I don't know, is like keeping millions of people in poverty. What? Not that.
The dog died.
The dog died. Okay.
We are talking about Greens freaks here who do love animals, to be fair, and they might be a little bit like, oh, puppy.
Maybe if you were like, my dog is dying, donate now to save him.
I'll do it. You don't think I'll do it? I'll fucking do it. Unless we hit our fundraising targets, unless this sprout reaches its target amount, the dog gets it.
I will kill Max, but I will put Max down unless we meet our target before 30 June.
I saw that Left Renewal thought that it was funny that Adam's dog was named Max. He's like, I probably wouldn't name my dog after the guy who wants your job.
Yeah, well, that's what I was genuinely confused by. That's why I thought this was a joke. I thought it was a joke about Max. I think, yeah, look, I understand you need to find new ways to make the email interesting, but I don't quite get the link. I don't quite get the angle. It's like, my children are living now in a world without Max, or they will be living in a world.
The dog, he does mention in the full email, he says the dog died. It was really hard for the family. The kids are very, very sad. Made me think about my kids being sad.
Yeah, okay. So he's like, my kids were sad because my dog died and I care about my kids.
It's sad when a family dog dies, but I hope that these kids have something else going on in their lives.
Right. Yeah, okay. It's like, donate to cheer up my children. They're watching the little thermometer on the Greens website very closely, and they're hoping that your donation, which will be tripled if you donate now, is going to bump us up to the top, and that would just make their little days.
Which also gives the impression that the donations are going directly to the Bandt family, which is not.
Yeah, Yes, right? Like what? Yeah, it's like donate to doggy funeral costs. We've got a crowdfunder.
We have to buy a new dog. What about this? One political insider told Daily Mail Australia the Greens have one of the most sophisticated email marketing systems in Australian politics.
Well, how many email marketing systems are there in Australian politics that we're one of the most sophisticated?
I think they just send a lot of them. I don't know if that counts as being
That's sophisticated.
Super sophisticated. But look, here's the final line of the email, and I guess Greens members probably would have seen this email that you would have had it, but I
didn't get this email. Interestingly,
Whoa,
but go on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Your pulse.
That's why I didn't understand that it was real. Go on.
As you've heard me say, we're on the brink of making history at the next election. Labor knows it. The fossil fuel industry know it. The whole system engineered to keep turning those staggering profits know it. And they will come after us with everything they've got. So whatever you can give helps. Every dollar makes a difference. Above all, though, I want to thank you for being with us. While some loss is a part of life, like losing our beloved Max, if we grasp this moment, we can stop climate losses on an unimaginable scale. We can give our kids the world they deserve.
You know what they should have done, though? They should have used the Max thing. Now I'm like, okay, you should have been like, we've lost one Max. We cannot lose another. Donate now to our fighting fund to keep Max Chandler Mather in Griffith.
The vets are telling us we have to put Max Chandler Mather down.
We're seeing a trend of Max losses, and we cannot let that continue. Okay.
People have been misled and lied to what the Greens actually stand for. They're not looking after the environment. They're a bunch of rat bags. They throw out policies out there to play on people's emotions.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Hey, look, this is Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. It's not an official Greens Party podcast. It is the official podcast of not emailing everybody asking them to donate when your dog dies. The official podcast of keeping dogs alive. It's the only one. It is made possible with the help of the Green Institute and produced by Michael the Griff Griffin and Tom's back. Well, you're not back here in the country, but you're here. I am, as usual, on Yoga and Turrbal Land. I'm in Mansion, but where are you, Tom?
I'm in London, mate. The home of colonisation, innit?
Yeah, you're going to visit the Queen's grave. Can you do that?
I don't know if she has a public grave. I don't know. I have no idea where she's buried.
Okay.
I saw a guy who looks like Rolf Harris the other day walking around the streets of London. That was pretty cool.
Okay.
That's it. That's been the holiday so far.
Wow, that's really fascinating stuff. Speaking of fascinating, this week we're discussing the latest on Israel's war on Gaza and its politics, both geo and domestic. And we're talking about the current dire state of Australian youth media and kind of, non-traditional media in general. First, we should thank our new patrons. Thanks for signing up to the Patreon for $3 a month or whatever you desire to give beyond that to help pay Mike's wages and keep the show going. And get access to heaps of cool bonus content. So Jordan, Claire, Liz, Isabel, Meg, Maria, and all of our lovely existing Patreon subscribers will now have access to the latest episode that just came out with Tammy Jonas from the Australian Food Sovereignty Alliance. We had a very interesting chat about like farming and agriculture and food sovereignty. She's the author of Farming Democracy, Radically Transforming the Food System from the Ground Up. And taught me a lot. She runs this little small scale farm. She has this kind of like cooperative system going with all the people in her community. They're trying to fundraise for an abattoir. We had these interesting chats around tensions between, kind of hardline vegan, animal welfare style politics and how she thinks of incorporating animal welfare into farming. So yeah, it was a really good chat.
Is she a Nationals voter? Did you find out this? Or?
Is she a Nationals voter? I don't think so. Okay. I wouldn't take a guess on how she votes, but if I was door knocking, I'd probably put her as a 2. Maybe a 1. Maybe a 1.
What's that? Is that good? Is that persuadable?
That's good. Have you never been door knocking, Tom?
I haven't had the number system ranked. I haven't used that yet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, my Queensland door knockers will know what I mean.
Shout outs. Before we jump into our big stories this week, we had a couple of news hits we wanted to chat about. As we're recording very recently, the Labor Party started to announce a whole bunch of candidates over the next little while. They're going to sort of roll out who they've pre-selected to run in various seats around the country, including in the currently Greens-held seat of Ryan against Elizabeth Watson-Brown. Who the fuck is Rebecca Hack?
Rebecca Hack, or as 6 News helpfully displayed her on a graphic, they had Watson Brown pointing to a picture of Libby and then simply Hack pointing to a picture of the Labor candidate, which I think is probably a little bit deliberate. She also ran, I can't remember if we discussed her previously on the podcast, because she ran in Walter Taylor, which is West Side Council seat, same area. I don't think that she did all that well. Labor is really, Labor is dying in a lot of places and dying in Brisbane, but particularly in the inner west, their vote is down in the low teens. So don't know how much of a chance she'll have there, but best of luck to you,
surely the greatest
Hack.
threat, because this was a Liberal seat, as we know. There was one. Yes, the Liberals will surely be the greatest threat of winning that back from Elizabeth. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. They're definitely there, or even though there's a state election, they're very much targeting Libby. They have all of their billboards and their attack flyers and everything have Libby's face on it. Ryan is their main game. I think they are probably going after Maywar, and they're trying to keep their seats like Moggle in that area, but they are really trying to win Ryan back.
They're trying to tarnish her with the extreme green thing, right? Yeah. Which think is so fun. I mean, Libby is just the most delightful, friendly, normal person in the world.
She is. And she has great radical politics, but I don't think that the electorate is going to buy, perhaps in the same way that they might have bought the attacks against John O'Suriranganathan, for example, in the council election in Brisbane. I don't know that is necessarily going to stick in the same way with Libby, but who knows? They've got big fucking budgets, and I don't think we can discount them. And it is a tight margin. We only won those Brisbane seats by a fucking hair. So, hopefully Hack doesn't fuck it up too badly, because if their vote goes too low, if they concede too much ground to the LNP, we both have to try and keep the LNP vote down. Although I know, sounds like Anthony Albanese is confident that Queenslanders are going to turn back away from the Greens towards Labor. I saw he did some interview or an article about how Queenslanders who voted for the Greens will be disappointed that the Greens have spent a lot of time criticising, the government, Labor, and so they're turning away from the Greens in droves, which source, ? There's no polling to support that. The Greens vote continues to grow in Queensland, and the Labor vote is very much in trouble. So don't know what that's based on, but go off, King.
Who should they be criticising exactly?
Yeah, I don't know. That's right. All of the messaging that the Greens went to the election on, where they won a bunch of seats, which was about pushing Labor to go, faster and further on things like climate and, this was before Palestine was an issue, but cost of living and all of that, which is what the Greens have done. You would think that the voters would be thinking, oh, thank you for doing those things that we voted for you to do, but perhaps not. I'm not the Prime Minister. What would I know?
Jubilation and relief. Euphoric supporters of the far-left coalition in Paris. The new Front Populaire is the surprise winner of France's snap election, beating the far right.
Vive la France!
Terriblement soulagé. What a relief. We couldn't let the National Rally win. It wouldn't be the France of liberty, equality, fraternity. Our country could not let that happen.
And we should talk briefly about France too. Some good news out of France for once in the world.
Yes. I can't do French. Can you do it?
Très bien.
Très bien.
Heaps bien.
Heaps bien. Baguette. The new...
Où est les fascists?
What?
Où est
revoir,
les
fascistes. Au revoir.
À tout à l'heure. À tout à l'heure.
What's that mean?
See you later, I think.
Oh, that's cute. All right. Well, look, so my understanding is that this wasn't they were sort of thinking that the left was maybe fucked. It sounds as though there was this left coalition that was formed literally only a few weeks before the election. And this is the New Popular Front. It has parties including the Greens and the Socialists, as well as France Unbowed. And they kind of got together and they managed to actually get a whole bunch of seats. The centrist Emmanuel Macron's bloc came second. They've got 168 seats, as I understand it, while the New Popular Front have 182. And the great news is that is more than the far-right National Rally seats. They won 143. And this is just the thing that if you haven't this week spent some time watching videos of supporters of the New Popular Front reacting to this news. It is quite joyful. It's tears and like kind of almost disbelief and just vindication that you can take on a far-right movement, not by capitulating to them, not by adopting some of their policies or trying to meet them halfway, but by presenting a radical alternative left progressive agenda and win and beat them and grow your representation hugely. As I understand, there was not quite as simple as like, it's not as though they've won and now they're going to be in government. It's still very much in flux because they don't have a majority. They're like 100 seats short, and there's all this discussion about what kind of coalitions will need to be made in order to form government in France. Is that right?
I believe so. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the kind of agenda and the things that this left coalition were identifying as the kind of things they want to do, like, taxing the rich, reducing the work week.
Taxing the rich by 100% on income over 400,000 euros, which is about $643,000, which we love it. That you're literally just capping income.
That's enough money for you.
Yeah.
Enough.
It is enough.
Sacre bleu.
It's Trump French.
Increasing the retirement age, I think, again, trying to reverse all that stuff. So that's good. I mean, my understanding is a little bit of dodginess in terms of the left doing tactical stuff, like standing down in seats where the centrist party were going to run, but not always getting the favor returned from the beautiful centrists. And,
okay.
You'd love to see this. Of course, fascism is terrible, but is it as terrible as left-wing people who want to do stuff for working class people? Yuck.
Yeah.
So interesting stuff that came out of that. But broadly, you would have to say this is a very good news story for the centre-left to the real left working together to defeat the truly toxic and atrocious Marine Le Pen and her fascist adjacent politics.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So because it's Marine Le Pen's party, National Rally, and they're the ones that the very anti-immigration agenda broadly, as I understand it, like a lot of Islamophobia is kind of what their whole platform was built on, and there's concern about them rising in popularity. I will say, from what I understand, they didn't necessarily, they haven't completely flopped though. Like that, they got 143 seats. It's their best result that they've ever had in an election. They're the largest single party in the parliament. So it's not perfect news, but it is still exciting to see that they didn't fucking beat the left. And as I understand it, and this is from me literally Googling how French politics works for, maybe half an hour this morning, but we'll find out more on what any alliances or coalitions might be emerging in the coming week. The parliament sits on the 18th of July and they'll be voting in their president. And that's where the way that people vote then may kind of give some indication as to what the fuck is going to go on in France.
The president or the prime minister?
Well, they said parliamentary president. So maybe that's their prime minister?
Oh, maybe that's their speaker or something? I'm pretty sure that
because they have the presidential elections separately, yeah.
Yes, that's separate. And the prime minister, who is from Macron's party, resigned based on the results.
Tried to, right?
This is what the people wanted. Oh, he tried to, or they didn't let him?
I think that, so I think what happened was the prime minister tried to resign, but the president was like, no, things aren't quite, it's a bit unclear what's happening. So just stay there for a second until we can sort out what's going on. That was my understanding from the articles. Any French political experts writing?
Yeah, please.
Bon voyage.
And now I want to hand it over to the president of Ukraine, who has as much courage as he has determination. Ladies and gentlemen, President Putin. President Putin. We're going to beat President Putin. President Zelensky. I'm so focused on beating Putin, we got to worry about it. Anyway, Mr. President.
I'm better.
You are a hell of a lot better.
Okay, Israel's genocidal war on Gaza continues. Of course, we all know this. We read the news. It's all very bleak. There is heaps to talk about in terms of what's actually happening on the ground in the war itself and the domestic politics for Australia. Somewhat briefly, very bleakly, this week, the IDF told all residents of Gaza City to evacuate as 2 Israeli airstrikes killed more than 50 people. One Israeli bombardment hit 4 houses in Deir el-Balach and the nearby Nuseirat refugee camp inside the humanitarian safe zone, where Israel has told Palestinians to flee, killing 20 people, including 6 children. Then followed the deaths of 29 Palestinians, mostly women and children, in a strike on a tent camp for displaced people outside a school in southern Gaza, where a crowd had gathered to watch a football match at a school, for God's sakes. Have you seen this footage that's been doing the rounds at all?
I watched it because you linked it in the show notes and was reminded why I don't watch this stuff. But also I probably should, because it reminds you how fucking real and bleak it is, and it always makes me cry.
Yeah, gosh, it is. It's insane. I mean, like this moment of a group of people gathering to do something very normal, to play a football match, I guess to find some kind of respite in the middle of a war when they're in a humanitarian zone, the place they were told to go for safety, and then just everything breaks out into chaos as these strikes hit, and the camera is jolty and going everywhere, and you're seeing dead bodies, many of them blurred in the CNN version of the footage, but I'm sure you can find the raw footage out there if you like. And I've been the same. I've been trying to avoid a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the footage at the hospitals is just really like that. It's just literally bodies all over the floor. And even I think even when you see those moments of individuals or families mourning someone who's died, like in that clip that you put in the show notes, there's a group of women who are mourning like their father has died. And it's like, even that is heartbreaking. And then you just remember that that's just on like it's that times thousands and thousands and thousands.
Yes. And single families losing dozens of people within the same family, right?
Yeah.
Like entire lines are being wiped out here because of this
which
war.
is the objective.
Indeed. Great news on this front. Israel is looking into reports that civilians were harmed during this strike. So they're checking it out, guys.
That's so good. Well, I mean, I noticed that this was a CNN clip that you linked here. They did say, they quoted that they're looking into reports or looking for evidence. And they were like, it's not hard to find. It shouldn't take long to find evidence of civilian casualties or impacts on civilians. You literally just, look out the fucking window, like look at it. You can see. Yeah.
Use your fucking eyes. Plus, this week, a group of independent UN experts declared that Gaza is being subjected to a famine. They released a statement a couple of days ago. We declare that Israel's intentional and targeted starvation campaign against the Palestinian people is a form of genocidal violence and has resulted in famine across all of Gaza. When a 2-month-old baby and 10-year-old Yazan al-Kaferna died of hunger on 24th of February and 4th of March, respectively, this confirmed that famine had struck northern Gaza. The whole world should have intervened earlier to stop Israel's genocidal starvation campaign and prevented these deaths, the experts said. 34 Palestinians have died from malnutrition since 7th October, the majority being children. Inaction is complicity. Pretty unequivocal. They're independent experts there from the United Nations. This is genocidal violence. Obviously, the strikes themselves and the direct shooting of people is clear direct violence.
Yeah.
But there's this other one. Yeah. Which was also backed up by this Lancet study that was released. This is reporting from Al Jazeera. The cumulative effect of Israel's war on Gaza could mean the true death toll could reach more than 186,000 people, according to a study published in the journal Lancet. Gaza's Ministry of Health has the death toll at over 38,000 Palestinians since October 7th. You probably heard that number. I mean, 40,000 has also been quoted a lot. But this Lancet study pointed out the death toll is higher because the official toll does not take into account thousands of dead buried under rubble and indirect deaths due to destruction of health facilities, food distribution systems, and other public infrastructure. So this concept of indirect deaths, when you account for them, is when you're getting closer to 186,000. Such a number would represent almost 8% of Gaza's pre-war population of 2.3 million. Now, the only disclaimer is to say that this study has not been peer-reviewed. It was written in the correspondence section of the journal. But still, fucking hell. I mean, what can you possibly say about those kind of figures? And this got a bit of reporting and a bit of coverage, but I don't know. Do you think these stats or this kind of death toll stuff moves the dial or the conversation at all?
It is that question where it's like, at a certain scale, it becomes hard to, how can you push any further? Like, I think, I don't know if anyone who wasn't already thinking, hey, that's probably enough now. Like, maybe we should sanction and end arms trade with Israel and, stop this fucking war. If anyone wasn't already thinking that, is it going to make a difference that it's 38,000 versus 186,000 people? I doubt it because of the way that this war has been waged, not just on like a physical basis, but on an informational basis, like a cultural basis, that the numbers and the facts almost don't matter because of the propaganda around the like morality of Israel's actions here. And that morality seems to justify a limitless number of deaths.
Yes.
It is quite literally unlimited how many people it is morally justifiable for Israel to kill if you buy into their idea that they, must quote unquote exterminate Hamas, and that to do that they just have to do anything possible. Doesn't matter how many civilians died. Literally doesn't matter.
There was that weird period, wasn't it, where the figures were being called into question, right? The veracity of these Gaza Health Ministry figures,
the Hamas
which
run.
drove me crazy. I mean, first of all, it was just it wasn't true. We know that the same figures have pretty much aligned with other independent accounts in the past, and so they really are accurate. Although they're almost certainly conservative and almost certainly underestimating how many people have died, but. These aren't figures to be dismissed, as people like Joe Biden, good decent Joe Biden, regularly did. But what was infuriating about that is because people were saying, "Oh, you can't believe those figures," implying that if those figures were true, we would change what we would do, what we're doing, or like that would be an unacceptable death toll. Where in fact, those very same people were saying, "Well, even if we have killed 38,000 Palestinians, that's totally fine because."
But that's
we've got this mission.
And that's always the process of this argument. And there's even there's a term for it that it's like denied. First you dispute the facts, and then when the facts become proven, you're like, no, there was a reason that happened, and even if there wasn't actually a reason that we did that, well, overall it's justified because this. It always will just flow on to the next argument.
We're also this week seeing the just black and white, clear double standard when it comes to Israel's war on Gaza and Russia's war on Ukraine. This week, Russia launched a wave of missile strikes on cities across Ukraine, killing 37 people. One of the sites bombed was a children's hospital. Universal, unequivocal condemnation from across the board. Western leaders, we've got this NATO summit happening at the moment. Anthony Albanese called the attacks abhorrent and pledged ongoing Australian assistance to Ukraine because their struggle is very relevant for the whole world as we go forward. Whatever the fuck that means, I don't know. Why? Yeah, the Ukraine struggle, good. Palestinian struggle, well, it's very complicated and messy.
Yeah, I do.
And you just never get the same thing, right?
Yeah, I admit, I don't know, something about the double standard discourse. I agree. This is a very blatant double standard, but I also am like, well, we should be I agree that it is fucking abhorrent and a war crime, and the fact that children being bombed, that hospitals are being targeted, should be of great concern to anyone who cares about peace and human rights. And that's horrific. And maybe it's the fact that I guess I feel angry and sad that we can't even just acknowledge that and deal with that problem because we simultaneously have this genocidal war going on somewhere else, and that is politicized and sits within this frame of ideology. And so the only discussion we're having is about the political approach to these things rather than the human impact. We can't even just agree that it's fucked up to bomb children's hospitals,
True, yes. I mean, I'm certainly not calling for anyone to be less empathetic or less appalled at what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I'm saying same standards, please.
Yeah.
And it just could not be clearer. It is just so blatant. It's so remarkable that we have these two conflicts happening at the same time when the double standards of the West are just completely on display. Again, solidarity with people in Ukraine. No one deserves this. Believe in international law and human rights across the board. Just asking for consistency and the way the media treats it. I mean, this is doing the rounds. New York Times, same articles appeared this week. Russia strikes children's hospital in deadly barrage across Ukraine. When it comes to Israel, deadly strike hits northern Gaza hospital where many were sheltering. Whoa,
right.
Where'd that strike come from? That's so...
Yeah. There was a comparison. I'm trying to find the Penny Wong tweets about both incidents. And it was a similar thing, that it was one is an unequivocal condemnation that is in active voice and names who has done the bombing and, humanizes the civilian victims. And the other one is vaguely bad thing has happened and maybe it shouldn't have,
Just I mean, there's a Keir Starmer quote of him saying, and you can put the clips side by side. Him being like, yes, Russia is committing war crimes and they're breaking international law and it's terrible and we should oppose it. And then asked, do you think Israel's committing war crimes? Like, well, I can't sit in this radio studio and make a judgment about something that's happening millions of miles away.
So funny.
Have you heard much about the status of like ceasefire negotiations? Where were that
lately?
No, that feels like that's really.
Yeah, I haven't been keeping track of that. Are we making progress?
Yeah, I think they're really close.
Good news. It's going to end soon. That's fantastic. I'm really glad you've brought me that today, Tom.
Remember Biden coming out and saying, hey, I think, we've got this deal and it's up to Hamas. It's all on Hamas. The only people standing in the way of a ceasefire is Hamas, right? This was the line, even though we were getting lots of reports that Israel wasn't agreeing to these terms, even though it was apparently an Israeli offer. They were like, hang on, there's actually quite a bit of resistance here from the Israeli end. And now we've got to the point where Netanyahu is saying that Israel will only commit to securing a Gaza ceasefire deal provided Israel's red lines were respected. Hamas has accepted a key part of a US plan aimed at ending the 9-month-old war, dropping a demand that Israel first commit to a permanent ceasefire before signing the agreement. Wow. Seems like quite a concession.
Significant.
Netanyahu's insisted the deal must not prevent Israel from resuming fighting until its war objectives are met. At the outset of the war, he pledged to annihilate Hamas. So we have a situation in which two parties are expected to come to an agreement, a ceasefire deal, in which one of the parties agrees to the other party's conditions that party is going to wipe them out and kill them all.
Yeah. Like, what? Sure. How is that a deal? That's, yeah. I mean,
that is, as Donald Trump would say, a bad deal, folks. It's a bad deal.
Yeah. And if a deal is agreed to, you kind of tend to think that it's a fake deal.
Yeah, well, it's just like, the terms, I mean, it's not in Netanyahu's political interest to end this war. He's perpetuating the war for his own political survival. No one is taking it seriously, and no one is prepared to admit the idea that if we are to reach some form of peace, if you are to stop the bloodshed, that will require some give and take, and it will have to confront head on Hamas's reason for being, or the fact that this militant organization exists and has support from the Palestinian population because they're resisting an illegal occupation that's been going for decades and decades.
So when you say deal, like in this latest iteration, what does Palestine get? What do they get?
Well, they at least for a brief period of time,
temporary ceasefire. Okay.
A temporary ceasefire. They'd have to release some hostages. Maybe some Palestinian hostages being held by Israel, which gets way less coverage, would also be released. And also
release so they can then bomb them. Cool.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah. Give them a good feed before we annihilate them with bombs.
I know there's a week old, but last Sunday, Marina Faruqi, Deputy Greens leader, was on Insiders and being interviewed. Have you seen much of this chat?
I haven't seen much of it. I think I heard that it was kind of disgraceful and just the classic badgering of Marine on same clickbaity talking points about Hamas. I've watched a little clip of her where, David Spears is just asking the same question over and over and over again because that's what good journalists do.
Well,
I
have problems with the question, which we'll get to in a moment. The thing I quite like about David Spears is that he does pursue politicians. If he doesn't feel like he's got an answer to the question, he will keep going. And I think you could maybe.
But at a certain point, it's like you're just doing this for the clip, right? Like at a certain point, it's clear that she doesn't have an answer to the question that he has posed.
Yes.
So wouldn't you then just say, so you don't have an answer to that question then?
Yeah, I mean, he sort of effectively says that. I think, look, she was going on there to talk about Gaza. She was going there to talk about Fatima Payman. She had to explain why the Greens didn't support the Labor amendment to this, to the Greens motion in regards to Palestinian statehood, in which they said they would support the recognition of Palestinian statehood as part of a peace process in support of a two-state solution and a just and enduring peace. Okay. Now, explaining why the Greens wouldn't support that, she did like a pretty good job on that, I thought, initially, sort of saying, it was about delay. We put a very simple motion out there. Labor tried to put all these caveats to kick the can down the road. That's fair enough. But I think she really needed to zero in on what it means, the difference, the real material difference between Australia recognising Palestinian statehood unilaterally and the peace process line, which all the US and all these Western leaders who say they support a two-state solution have to say, which basically means never actually happening. So I thought that was her job, and she kind of did okay then. Then we get on to the question of Hamas. So like, okay, you're for Palestinian self-determination. What if Palestine determines that they want Hamas? What do you do with that? And eventually the headline on ABC was Green's Deputy Marine Frickie refuses to say whether Hamas should be dismantled. This is the question that David Spears repeated again and again.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Do you think she should have said something else? What did you think of her response on that front?
Yeah, like I think you're like, I think it's not the best response. Like I think it doesn't seem like she's that prepared on it, but she gets to, I like when she sort of started to convince me, if I was looking at it objectively, you know, was trying to get at the actual realities or logistics of what that means. Like she's like, Hamas is something that exists here. Who dismantles Hamas? Like I think I would have liked her to expand on that point, that it's like, what do you mean dismantle Hamas? Right. Who does that? What does that look like? How does it happen? You know, what do you actually mean? Because otherwise, like it clearly is just
because we're seeing what it looks like, right? This is my thing. I'm like, they talk about dismantling Hamas as if it's in some hypothetical, you know, happening in some other universe.
Yeah,
like,
would you dissolve this department? You know,
that's like, Israel's goal right now, and we're seeing what dismantling Hamas is. It's tens of thousands of Palestinians dead. It's chaos. It's a genocide. It's starving people. So if you're asking me, is like, if this is what dismantling Hamas is, then absolutely not. Yeah. Then I think she could probably have gone to the point of saying, you cannot bomb an idea out of existence, right? You could kill every member of Hamas, but if the occupation continues, if the subjugation of Palestinian people continues, then something will replace Hamas. Going to the fundamental material relationship between Israel and the state of Palestine and Palestinian people, which is what generates Hamas and the resistance against that. Like that seems to be a key thing. This delusion that you can actually dismantle an entire idea. There are organizations before Hamas there will be others that come after, because Israel is illegally occupying Palestinian people and committing the crime of apartheid.
Yeah, and like maybe she kind of skipped ahead and got straight to, well, it's a separate question to the question of Palestinian statehood, or liberation, which is what we're focused on, and we support self-determination and that sort of thing, without bridging that gap for most people, that it's like, well, actually think about this. If most people think about this and go, yeah, what do I actually mean dismantle Hamas? Like, I know Hamas is bad or whatever, but what are we actually looking at here? So yeah.
Great moment at the end where she sort of says, this social cohesion point. Are the Greens disrupting social cohesion? Is Fatima Payman disrupting social cohesion? Is the Muslim vote disrupting social cohesion? She says, actually, I think the social cohesion thing is bullshit, and it's the way the major parties are telling people to shut up because they're saying things they don't like, because they're speaking out against both major parties in their position on this genocide. Yeah. So I thought that was cool. Just quickly, sorry, I know we're going a bit long here, but there's a lot of bullshit going on the social cohesion front. Also this week, the Albanese government appointed lawyer Gillian Siegel as Australia's first anti-Semitism envoy. During a 3-year term, Siegel will advise the government on issues relating to anti-Semitism and engage with the community to increase understanding. What do you think, Emerald? Good plan?
Increase understanding. I mean, obviously, like, this is a part of the whole Zionist, like, pro-Israel push to, I would say, exploit the idea of anti-Semitism for political ends and for, like, pro-Zionist ends. Because she is a Zionist, right?
Big time.
Yeah. So it's not just about anti-Semitism. It's not about Jewish people. As fucking always, and increasingly so, including in Australia, it is about conflating the Zionist project of Israel and the Israeli government and the Israeli state with every Jewish person and Judaism as a religion.
Yes, Gillian Siegel is not a fence sitter on these kind of questions. She's the immediate past president of the Executive Council of Australian Jewry, which is a Zionist and very conservative representative body of Australian Jews. In November, she told a vigil for Israeli hostages that there can be no ceasefire until every hostage has been released. She joined with the president of the Zionist Federation to criticize Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong for saying, we all want to take the next steps towards a ceasefire in Gaza. Remember that? Like, the most mild of all statements in the world.
Yeah.
They said unless Hamas was removed from power, a ceasefire would endanger Israel. Again, dismantle Hamas by killing a bunch of people. She described the Morrison government's adoption of the controversial International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition of anti-Semitism as a watershed moment. As listeners probably know, this is a controversial statement that says that criticism of Israel similar to that leveled against any other country cannot be regarded as anti-Semitic, but, saying that the existence of the state of Israel as a racist endeavor is lots of people, including people who originally wrote that definition, have come out against it. Lots of Israeli groups have also said that this does conflate criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism and is no good. It's she's coming down pretty hard on one side of this particular debate. And then all the coverage of this was very vague. I mean, obviously, again, anti-Semitism is terrible. There has been an increase in anti-Semitism attacks, and that is terrible. And no Jewish person should live with that. No person should live with that kind of discrimination. But clearly, the most the spiciest part of this debate is the intersection of claims of anti-Semitism and the entirely legitimate political activism surrounding anti-Zionism, particularly now more than ever before.
Yeah, well, and I don't always agree with everything Sally Rugg says, but I thought she was tweeting about this, and it's pretty spot on that it's like, yes, anti-Semitism is a problem that deserves recognition, and particularly has seen an increase in online spaces, in radical far right kind of spaces, but that's the point, is that we know that this envoy and the Australian government isn't going to focus on how particularly young white men get radicalized in those spaces to be white nationalists. Instead, the focus is anti-Semitism
college campuses,
growing because of Palestine.
the pro-Palestinian encampments. That's what they're talking about when they talk about an increase of anti-Semitism on campus.
Yeah, and so not only does the issue that actually probably needs attention not get the attention that it needs, but no, it becomes all about this thing that isn't actually an issue. And the other person who I think had a good take, which maybe we can link this in the show notes, we don't need to get into it on the show because I know that we've got more to talk about, but Geordie Silverstein in Overland, she did an article on this and about the way that the announcement of, there's a special envoy to combat anti-Semitism, and we're also going to do a special envoy to combat Islamophobia. This kind of both sidesism actually is just placing these groups again in opposition to one another and separating out Jewish people and separating out Muslim people and perpetuating the idea that the war in Gaza is about Jews versus Muslims.
Right.
When, as Geordie says, it is not. It is a matter of colonialism.
Yes.
They're reinforcing this false idea that the war Israel is waging against Palestinians is a question of different and clashing religions. And also that, Geordie says, as a Jewish person, quote, making Jews a hypervisible and distinct group with special needs who sit outside of history, politics, or regular society is an anti-Semitic technique. And, that her argument is that if we want to combat discrimination and racism, it needs to be a whole of society focus, a community project, not a carving off of different groups, and then how do we deal with that group over there and how do we deal with that group over there. So it's a good piece.
I mean, there are some people who literally tell you, I think, anti-Semitism is the worst racism or is worse than other ones, right? The
insane irony of that, right?
This hierarchy. But it's crazy. Yes, as you said, they announced this special envoy on anti-Semitism and then said, we will soon appoint one to combat Islamophobia. And that is just crazy to me. Why wouldn't you do the both? What is the rush on getting one envoy out? Surely you would organize, if you're going to do two, you would surely organize your other envoy and announce them at the same time. Otherwise, you give the very strong impression, the thing that we all know that's true, which is a double standard when it comes to these two discriminations, and as if one is less worthy of your effort to sort out and organize. We'll get to the Islamophobia shit down the line.
But this is what I mean. Either way, if they had announced the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia envoys at the same time, it's okay, so clearly you're creating these positions not as part of the government's movement to, stamp out hatred and discrimination or anything like that. It is a response to an ongoing war where you are trying to perpetuate the idea that the war is about a clash of religions and groups of people rather than a colonialist, like, settler project, you know, and that's neither of those. Neither of those are good.
Or this insane idea about don't bring the conflict here. It's like, we have the internet, motherfuckers. Ordinary people are just seeing the news. They're seeing what's happening. And as human beings, they're reacting to that. And you can't just wish away that conflict, nor demonize people like the Greens and other people in the pro-Palestinian movement for pointing out the very obvious, which is genocide is bad as genocide is happening right now and we're complicit in it. We should really work really hard to stop it. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? But on the flip side of Islamophobia, you know, a reminder that in May, a man who placed a pipe bomb outside a Sydney house displaying the Palestinian flag, pipe bomb as well as a note that said enough, take that down that flag, one chance, was sentenced to 12 months in prison. I mean, that got a bit of coverage, but almost nowhere near. And again, any Jewish people being harassed for, you know, for wearing their religious garb or Jewish kids feeling bad about their uniforms, that is terrible. But I'm sorry, I have not seen anything equivalent to that kind of physical threat, like a you know, bomb threat inside someone's house, working the other way. I just haven't. And maybe
and once again, I don't think that you help the persecution of Jewish people by continually conflating every Jewish person and Judaism with Zionism and with the state of Israel that is conducting a genocide. Like maybe if you, as in the Australian Council jury, for example, aren't out there every day saying that, every Jewish person is the same as Israel.
Yes.
While people can see in their phones and on their screens every day what Israel is doing, then people wouldn't be, like, students going to school who are visibly Jewish wouldn't be associated with a fucking genocide.
Yes. And if you tell people, oh, you're protesting against a genocide, that's anti-Semitic, I don't think they're going to take your accusations of anti-Semitism very seriously, right? They're going to dismiss the whole thing.
Well, this is the story that you just, I don't know when this was reported, but quite recently when we're recording, that this activist and businessman, Hashem Taya, who owns Burgatory, this is in Melbourne, right, has been notified by police that he will be arrested and interviewed as part of an investigation into whether chants and speeches at rallies and demonstrations in the CBD have breached the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act, and that so they're investigating whether he broke the law by saying chants such as all Zionists and are terrorisms and equating Zionism with terrorism. That's like, he's being charged for that, for which Zionism, which is a fucking ideology, by the way. It's not a race, it's not an ethnicity, it's not a religion. And he is going to be pursued under these laws, the same laws that, as I understand it, Tom, the only other person who've been convicted under them so far is literal Nazi Blair Cottrell.
Yeah. I've never heard of this law before. I didn't know that Blair was convicted under this, but he's the only other person where they've pursued this.
That's the same. What did he do? Was it about the same?
Yeah, I'm sure it was exactly the same. I'm sure he was protesting against genocide and standing up for people and kids as they were being bombed by a state backed by the US. I'm sure it was something very equivalent to that. In a statement posted to Instagram in response, Taya said it was profoundly upsetting to be compared to someone like Cottrell, a man who has degraded women, committed violent acts, and genuinely incited hate. I feel immense sorrow and frustration. As I call for freedom, equality, and justice for all, including Jews, I am repeatedly painted as an enemy. This isn't just a personal attack on me, Hashtaya. This media war you've waged is an attack on the entire global pro-Palestinian movement. I look forward to the free speech crowd coming to his defense.
Yeah, thankfully we've got a really, strong free speech movement in Australia and globally that I'm sure will be standing up for this. Yeah. Elon Musk will probably be hearing from at any moment now.
Well, Meta's just changed the hate speech policy in regards to the term Zionist, basically literally removing posts from people who criticize Zionists if it's done in a dehumanizing way, as determined, I guess, by Mark Zuckerberg or whoever is in charge of it at the whole Meta thing. I mean, fuck me dead. Okay. There's a story about Melbourne Uni, like tracking students who are involved in the camp, but using like technology to spy on kids who are involved in that encampment. Sydney Uni announced a policy that they're now going to ask people to give 3 days notice of any protests moving forward. I mean, it is an absolute assault on people's democratic rights to do the very basic thing of protesting against a genocide, which is happening before our very eyes.
Yes, because facts are not on their side. And as you say, people can literally see what is going on. We have access to the news. And so they need to go to such desperate lengths to try and, squeeze this into some narrative that increasingly it's clear it does not fit. And everyone can see that.
Now, do you have a team?
I am green curious.
Oh.
And that this is not a political, I don't know what platforms either of them have, honestly. I don't know what they believe in.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that the Greens are just a lot more interesting to watch on TV.
Okay.
But to me, the Greens have a lot going on.
Well, they're much more interesting.
Who are you into?
I'm into more dragon fights, honestly.
Yeah.
I just like that works.
Super quickly, because I don't necessarily feel that I have some like particular insight into this and why it's happening or even the ins and outs of what is going on, but there are lots of like layoffs and restructurings happening in media that particularly are affecting you know, kind of alternative media and media targeting young people. And I wanted to talk about it very quickly. This week, the chief executive of the youth media site Pedestrian, that was bought by Nine kind of between 2015 and 2018, they increased their shares. But the chief executive is leaving as part of this restructure. And it emerged that a bunch of Pedestrian staff had been laid off, about half of their staff. They have like about 95 staff in Australia. Alongside this announcement that they were going to lose their licensing deals with these third-party brands, including Refinery 29, Gizmodo, Lifehacker, and Kotaku. And I understand also Vice AU. This may have been previously announced, but yeah, all of the Vice Australia staff, it seems, are now fucked because Pedestrian can no longer publish from these third-party websites. And this is all part of these massive cuts that Nine announced earlier in the year, cutting around 200 jobs across their networks. The union staff have voted to apply for protected industrial action. I think they also passed this no confidence motion in the head of the organisation this week. And there's like people are finding out morning of, people are finding out by email that they've lost their jobs. It's all pretty fucked. And I guess I've seen a few media companies like Vice Australia or Pedestrian that young people would go to for accessible and interesting media coverage of the things that they care about, just like either collapse or be mutated into something beyond recognition or use. And it's sad.
Didn't Murdoch buy a stake in Vice years ago too?
Oh, did he?
I think there was a point where
I don't know, because
Murdoch was getting his grubby little hands on that
yeah,
shit.
and like obviously Vice in general is a bit of a joke globally because it has that very distinctive, you know, kind of reporting style where they're like, I went and did drugs with a sex worker and like, here's my night out in Amsterdam. And that's every Vice story. But I do think that Vice Australia does really worthwhile and interesting work. And like I follow them on social media, for example, and they do little breakdowns of things that are happening in the news. And all these young, often young and talented, good reporters are just fucked over again by a media system that is because all these little bits get bought up by the bigger companies whose primary motive is not fucking communicating things to the world. It is making money. And when they can't make money, they're like, okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Yes, they're not exactly invested in the truth and justice. They're holding power to the count. I'm just looking up, does Junkie still exists, right? Yeah. Okay.
So, okay. And then this is what I was looking at because I was like, the ones that I can think of, there was Junkie, there was BuzzFeed Australia. Yeah. That was BuzzFeed Australia. I remember because when I was first learning about politics, like really knew nothing and was like getting all excited and into it, I listened to the Is It On podcast that Alice Workman and Mark DiStefano used to do. I think it was those two from BuzzFeed Australia. And I would read BuzzFeed articles and be like, I understand politics. This is fun and interesting. And then
I'm laughing and learning. These listicles are helping me understand.
Yeah.
The nature
and
of
same
capitalism.
with Junkie, I know like they used to do interesting things, but these ones, it's like they sort of still exist, but as I understand it, you know, staff have been cut and they've been restructured in such dramatic ways that they're not really performing that function anymore. It seems like maybe BuzzFeed just sort of like pulls through international articles or articles that aren't really, it's not about.
I thought BuzzFeed Australia like was shut down ages ago.
Yeah, that's sort of what I thought so too. Like I think there's a website, but it's probably just the international BuzzFeed.
There's like BuzzFeed, the website still posts stuff about Australia, but I don't think there's specific. Yes.
And Junkie,
and
it seems
used to work there.
Yeah, Junkie, it seems still exists, but I don't know any reporters who write for Junkie. Like, I don't really know. It seems like it's not really a thing in the way that it used to be. And yeah, even the fact that Alice Workman, who was at BuzzFeed Australia and was like one of the biggest, most influential kind of, I don't know, young people talking about politics in Australia, then went on to work for The Australian. And I will always wonder what the fuck happened to Alice Workman. And like, was she ever, what were her politics? Did she have politics? I don't, if anyone knows.
Well, she now was working on Q&A, I think, for a little bit. Yeah.
Is she? Yeah, well, anyway. But then speaking of The Australian.
They did an article on one Max Chandler Mather on the 1st of July. This is Junkie.
Who did? Junkie. Okay. Yeah, like I went to their website and they were reporting, but I'm like, they must have very low readership, right? And probably a very small staff. And Pedestrian, on the other hand, or Vice Australia, I feel like had significant followings. And even, they gain, like they'll have significant readership and kind of like a loyal readership, but just can't seem to stick it out. And part of it seems to be when they are more commercialized, like it gets to a point where obviously the people at the top of the organization are like, hey, there's potential here because people are reading this. Now we have to figure out how to monetize it. And when they try to monetize it, it just goes, it just completely goes downhill. I know Pedestrian, I think, has gotten worse and worse over the last few years, right? It used to be, have some interesting political content, and now it's just like recaps of, maths, you know.
And yes, and, integrated sponsored content kind of vibe. Yeah. I mean, to quote a very good friend of the podcast, Friendly Geordies, a lot of these websites, his critique was that a lot of these websites, sold themselves as being young and progressive when in fact they're running ads for the big banks and climate destroying things, which I think is a personally reasonable critique. Although I will also say that Friendly Geordies was at Junket years ago, which was
what's that?
Youth conference thing that Junkie ran in Canberra.
Okay.
So he was there. He was like getting amongst it, get that sweet, that sweet corporate dollar from a cool website that he loved.
There was an article that I came across. I was
there too, obviously.
There was an article that I came across in Cream magazine, which I haven't actually heard of before, but it seems like this kind of small publishing outlet. And their argument was that all of these organizations that are dying, like Vice and Pedestrian, part of the problem is that they present themselves as this kind of rebellious, different media company, and it comes across as disingenuous, and you don't believe it once they are bought out by companies like Nine and are just increasingly publishing things that are absolutely clash. Like, their whole website doesn't reflect that brand, and people aren't going to buy it anymore. And that is the thing, like there's this inflection point where they can't be profitable in the way that media executives want them to be. And it apparently, one of the main arguments or the main justifications that Nine are using for all of these cuts is about this downturn in digital advertising. So I think that's also having an impact. Apparently they haven't been able to renegotiate a deal that they had with Meta that they say had enabled them to hire a whole bunch of staff. And that's one of the big reasons that they can't continue to act. I mean, people also like revenue from TV and radio broadcast, ad revenue from that is way down because that would make sense. Why the fuck would you advertise on TV and radio when no one, like, who watches TV, who listens to the radio anymore? Everything is moving to TikTok and Instagram. And I don't quite understand how advertising works on TikTok in particular. Do you know like what the go is there? Because they do have ads.
I definitely have been hit with ads on TikTok. Yeah, for sure.
But I suppose it's more difficult for media companies to integrate the advertising into their business model in a way that works on these new platforms, right?
Right. Yeah. Or there's obviously influencers as well. And yes, there does seem to be a lot more big TikTokers who will, do that kind of sponsored content as well. But I guess obviously not everyone can. They're not doing that for, they only do that for products that align with their already existing brand, and that won't be insane for their audience to go after. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it's, I mean, the question is like, is it possible to have a quote unquote media company that is like for young people, or that is independent, or covers the things that young people care about, that can survive in, that is a business model that is going to enable people to be paid in the current context where people that's not the way that people consume media. And the answer often seems to, people say, well, the only answer is to pay for news. And I have to admit, like, I haven't got there yet. Like, I don't subscribe, I don't pay for any of my media. Fuck, I'm going to be cancelled for saying that, but it still feels weird to me. And I don't know that young people, even though they've grown up in this, like, in a media context where people are like, you need to pay for news. I don't know that any Zoomers are subscribing to media outlets. I mean, the Australians started their Oz, their youth outlet thing. Subscriptions, I think, were like $8 or $9 a month. They obviously fucking collapsed less than a year after they launched. So it was sort of their answer to Pedestrian or BuzzFeed or whatever. And they put it on the main page of the website, and they were like, it's run by only women, and most of our team are Gen Z, and we're going to be edgy. And obviously it failed. They said they were going to keep going with a social media presence. When I last checked, I could not find their social media presence. So
did they have commentators and stuff? Like, was Caleb Bond writing for the Oz or whatever?
No, because it's women only. But they did, like, they would sort of try and do it seemed as though the problem was, again,
nuclear power is on fleek.
Yeah, they were like packaging it. They were trying to package conservative or ideas that do not reflect young people for young people. And so they'd be like, yeah, isn't Dutton slave? Like, I don't know. And obviously
He's got Riz. This guy's
not going
Riz.
to work. I still maintain, I think I've said this before about social media, that like as fake as we all feel like social media is and has become, and in many ways it is, there is still something that something innate in us can tell when something is genuine, which is why, as much as media keeps changing and technology keeps transforming, we always seem to be trying to chase and are drawn to like real people and real stories. And even, like the closest thing probably to reporting that most people, particularly young people, would be seeing in their everyday lives at the moment is vox pops on the street that are meant to just be like real random people just given their take. Like, that is what is most popular at the moment. Or people
Baz
doing
Luhrmann just talking about his dating life.
Yeah, just normal people like Bob Catter talking about how much he gets paid.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't have like answers or takes on this. I do wonder if there is, if there's a way to do this, and if people ever really will pay for their media, because people pay for streaming, for example. Like, I guess that was a kind of a switch that people pay for Netflix and Stan and Disney Plus, and they pay for Spotify and all of that. Like, Zoomers will have accepted that. So how do we find a model where people pay for news? I know you pay for a lot of news, don't you? You're a good boy.
I do. I should stop fucking subscribing to the 9 Fairfax, particularly after they gave that shit
subscriptions
review.
to everything.
I have a few going, yeah. I still haven't subscribed to Navarro Media in the UK, which is probably the ones that both deserve my money, that most align with my values, that I listen to the most. So I really should
apart from Serious Danger, which is the priority independent media that you should be subscribing to.
See, it's like, I think paying for, somewhat more boutique outlets. I mean, Navarro does a lot of journalism across lots of different stories, lots of things, and they produce a lot of content. But, they're not I really go to them for opinion and analysis from a kind of socialist perspective.
You're not checking them in the morning,
No, and also I just think there are big news institutions that sort of underpin the basic fact gathering that we rely on from the ABC and probably from The Age and some other outlets like that. And it's very good that they exist. Just on a very basic, like, if you just want to get the facts of a story, it is important to have those kind of organizations.
But even so, that's the thing. Like, I probably should subscribe to The Guardian because I get a lot of my I will check The Guardian in the morning to get the news. And
I'm one of the Guardian's top readers globally.
Are you really? Well, they stopped. They were warning me for ages, and then they finally stopped. I can't read the articles in the app anymore. So I click on the article and it's like, you need to subscribe. And so now I just don't read The Guardian anymore. Like, sad, right? Like, I only read it when I'm on a desktop because I have that bigger barrier to just paying for fucking news. I probably should just do it. But anyway, RIP to Vice Australia, RIP to Pedestrian, probably. I don't know. They say they're going to continue and focus on local content, but what form that's going to take, I doubt that they're going to continue to be a major player. And the big companies just continue to grow and only focus on anything that can make them money.
Make cash, which, also again goes to like media concentration, which the Greens have talked about for a very long time. Exactly. The Murdoch Royal Commission is happening any day now.
When is that?
So
when is it coming? The Royal Commission is going to fix it. That's right. All of these questions soon to be answered once we get that Royal Commission.
Hi, everybody. My name is Heike. I'm sitting on a coal train. We are actually exporting death. We are exporting environmental crisis, and we are exporting climate chaos to other countries who feel they are in need to live our lifestyle because the capitalist system has been exported also.
Now, Tim, apart from sort of questioning the sanity of all of this, I get the feeling that these people are retirees looking for a hobby, looking for something to fill in their days, and we're all paying the price.
None of these people who have been arrested or dragged away, hardly any of them will spend any time in jail, any significant time. Let's make the punishment fit the crime. Let's put them to work loading coal, and then when they're all dusted up and black with the coal, send it to some woke juice bar where they'll be beaten up because they're wearing blackface. Make it fit the crime.
Exactly. Look.
All right. Pleasure to be back, everyone. Thanks for listening to our little show. Call to action to round things out. We didn't touch on it in our discussion, but the planet is still on fire. Can confirm. Global temperatures have breached the Paris Agreement threshold of 1.5 degrees for 12 months in a row. We did it, everyone.
Oh, we did it. We failed.
We totally do it.
Well, no need to worry about all those targets then. Good thing we didn't spend any time on those.
It was the hottest June on record, which was the 13th straight record hot month. Okay. Yes, it's very weird. You know this. And it all comes as Australian climate activist, 21-year-old Laura Davy is sentenced to 3 months jail for blockading a Newcastle coal terminal.
Yeah.
Blackade Australia has been doing all these actions and stuff.
That is prison time, right? That's not suspended. No. They are proposing that she spend 3 months in prison for blocking a coal terminal, a non-violent action on the most existential threat to humanity. Makes sense. Good laws.
Fantastic stuff. Yes, they're the real villains. That's the problem. So Blockade Australia has been doing lots of actions in Newcastle but getting very little coverage. Is that right?
Yeah. I hadn't seen – the only way I saw this was that Jono Suranganathan shared the Blockade Australia Facebook page. They post updates every single day and live streams from their actions. It seems as though there was at least a 16-day kind of rolling blockade actions at the Newcastle coal port, including, for example, a 17-year-old, Ayla, she locked onto a coal train for 5 hours.
Whoa.
There was an overnight blockade that they stayed there all night, and they have continually been bringing the rail lines to a standstill, stopping coal trains from coming in and out of the port. And yet, where has the media coverage been? Pretty wild, but honestly, when it's direct action like that and you actually are having a financial impact on those companies, I guess media coverage isn't the main objective, which is why, though, I just think it's fucking bratty and cynical of media companies to be like, well, they want coverage, so we won't cover it.
Sorry, that's not your call. It's news, you idiots. This is the people. This is the people that you're supposed to serve are doing things for a very important reason.
That a 17-year-old has gone to such great lengths for her future and is now, as I understand it, held in custody in a youth prison.
Yes.
Because of those actions. But no, that's not news.
Or, sorry that you've already covered that, but I'm sorry, it's the news. Sort of things might come up once or twice. Yeah. Remember, of course, the Newcastle coal port is the largest coal port in the world. So that's why it's the focus of all this particular action and why Australians are really focused on it. If you want to chip into the legal fund for Laura or Blockade Australia's general support fundraiser, we'll put a link in that. They've got a chuffed.org link if you're in a position to chip into that. And pop in your diaries, if you can make it, Rising Tide's 2024 People's Blockade will be happening in Newcastle in November for 10 days. risingtide.org.au is the place to go for those details. We are hoping to maybe be there for a little bit of that, potentially. We would like to maybe
don't know. My goodness.
It's the People's Blockade. We like being with the people. Links and more information in the show notes.
Rate and review the show, please. We like it when you do it. Sometimes I read the reviews, and when they're nice, I smile. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening. It helps people find the show. You can also help people find us by talking about us or sharing our stuff on socials. Follow us at Serious Danger AU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If you want to help us even more, you can chip in $3 a month or more on Patreon to become a subscriber, but you don't need to. It's Cosy Lives. We love you anyway. You can find links to merch and stuff like that at seriousdangerpod.com. Email us your ideas and compliments, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. Is that it, Tom? Are you going to go to bed?
Vale, Max. I'm going to sleep now.
Vale, Max.
Bye, everyone.
Serious Danger Australia.